law schools aren't teaching students to be complete lawyers. And in that context, we have to take charge of our own abilities and mental health and all that. And part of that is, okay, what do I do in terms of my views to help me put everything in perspective and to do things in a way that reduces the stress? Now, let's be realistic. You're never going to eliminate the stress. But at the same time, do we really want to be that, 60, 70-year-old lawyer who is just bitter and angry at the law and the clients, and every client is an idiot or whatever? Well, I certainly don't want to be that way. I don't want to have gone through all this schooling just to work for 30 some odd years and be miserable just so I can vacation for 10 years and be happy and then, end up in a retirement home, God forbid. Right. So for me, it's everyone in the profession, especially the younger people, need to make sure that they're taking an active role and doing things to address their mental health and their job satisfaction.
Howdy, and welcome to the show. Cooper's Code focuses on legal issues and notable practitioners, distilling wisdom so we all achieve the best results for our clients. I'm Miles Cooper, and I've been looking forward to sharing part 3 of this conversation with Shahrad Milanfar. One of the things that I'm aware of through having looked at your bio is that you've come up with a comprehensive training course on use of iPads in trial, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think the first time I ever tried a case using an iPad was in 2014. And around that time, I created a course for MCLE credit. And I actually had to fight with the state bar to give us credit because they didn't see it as legal work. Right.
Okay.
And so because it didn't talk about substantive law. I'm like, well, if lawyers are going into courtrooms and presenting, shouldn't they be effective at doing it in a way that actually resonates with jurors? So eventually, to their credit, they did grant the MCLE, and I should have renewed it, but I haven't recently. But basically, it's a course that teaches you how to essentially practice using an iPad, but also how to present information in trial using an iPad. And it's been really effective for us because if you think about it, when you summon a juror to a courtroom, what did they have to do? They got to turn their phone off and put it away. So just look at your phone. I mean, the iPhone has this ability. How many times a day do we pick up our phones? And that dopamine hit is something that is important to your brain subconsciously. And what we're telling them when they come into the courtroom is put this thing away. And for, 3, 4, 5 hours at a time, you're not allowed to use your phone. Now you come in and you have your foam board and your butcher paper, which is fine. Yet I come in with images that move and, timelines that are dynamic. And what happens? The jurors are now getting the feedback that they're missing from their phone. So who really are they going to believe more? What are they going to trust more? And as lawyers, again, the ABA had the model rule that says you're not competent unless you're up on technology, and the state bar has now adopted that rule. How many times a week do you hear from lawyers, technology is really not my thing. I'm not a technology guy. Well, guess what? We all have to be, because AI is coming, the jurors are changing, and just because it's worked the last 5 times you've tried a case doesn't mean it's going to work again later. And that's really my biggest thing to young lawyers is make yourself valuable to the senior partner. If they don't know how to use any of this stuff, you be the person who does it so that eventually that gets you in the courtroom and able to sit at that table, because you have to have a differentiating factor from all the other associates.
That is how I got my reps in.
Yep.
I was far cheaper than hiring a trial technology company to support a trial, and I seem to be able to do it. No, since I'm here, can I do a witness?
Well, and that's the thing, right? It's a lot of times for me, the trial experience that I got was, oh, nobody wants to do this trial? I'll do it. Even though the risk was there that it was going to be a massive verdict, right? I'll do it. I will take the risk. And if I get hit, then it's my name on the, $30 million verdict or whatever. Fortunately, I don't think, that ever happened. I think the largest verdict I took as a defense lawyer was 1.2 or 1.4 million. So, I guess technically it would be a nuclear verdict, but not a hyper-nuclear verdict. But at the same time, you're taking a risk, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there and learn from those types of experiences.
As we talk a little bit about the technology side, is there a platform that you recommend people use when they're using an iPad? For trial presentation, I mean. Obviously,
there's PowerPoint. And how you use the PowerPoint is important, right? There's a Far Side comic where it's the devil interviewing a disciple and says, how are your torture skills with PowerPoint, right? So you don't want to be that person. But there are other programs, Trial Pad, Transcript Pad. Those are all great pieces of software that you can use effectively to do a lot of things. And it's important because the Transcript Pad is a great program because you can put all your transcripts in there and then do word searches across, or do specific codes that you can assign where liability, speed of the car, for instance. You can tell exactly what every witness says about the speed of the car. So those are great tools that help distill a lot of information down to something that's understandable. And then there's just little things here and there. There used to be a lot of good jury selection apps, but because lawyers were cheap and didn't buy them, they all kind of went by the wayside. I don't think there's that many great ones there now. So those are just generally things that you can utilize for your trial presentation to make it something that the jurors are able to see. I mean, I've even used Keynote that's the one I primarily use. And I've crossed an expert before, and I had the bullet points of what I wanted from them in cross. And every time they conceded, I would tap the button and it would show up on the screen, right? Instead of walking up and let me write this on the board for you. And the jurors were like, well, how did you know that was going to work? I was like, well, that's the risk you take. But there are really cool, creative things you can do. And obviously videos, right? I mean, I always say, if you've got a plaintiff, why don't we take their pictures and utilize them to make an effective presentation to show the jury who this person is, right? And we also did an animation for one of our cases that didn't go to trial. And those animations, if they're accurate, they are incredibly powerful for the jury to see. Why? Because visually they see how does the brain bounce inside the skull when the person is hit, as opposed to what's the big deal? Well, no, it's a big deal if you look inside the skull. Or we had an expert, our client had a fractured orbital bones, and he said, oh, well, yeah, I see those in the cartoon that you've made. Was there anything inaccurate about the cartoon? No. Okay, so now that demonstrative is something the jury would see in trial, right? But he also said that the force from our client getting kicked in the face would stop at the orbital bones because they fractured, essentially. So I simply asked him a question. I said, doctor, how many feet does the brain sit behind the orbital bone? And of course, you idiot lawyer, counsel, that's absurd. Why? Because it sits millimeters behind the orbital bone. And yet the force stopped at the orbital bones and didn't go in the brain. Is that what you're telling the jury? Yes, counsel, that's what I'm telling the jury. Okay, We'll take that. But the imagery and that testimony, so those are things that, in my opinion, tell the effective story, right? And this expert is going to have you believe that somehow getting kicked in the face stops here and it doesn't go into here. Okay, go tell that to 12 people and see what common sense does.
Visual displays of information. It's not something they teach in law school, and yet so important.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, like, going to Golden Gate and going through that program, to me, what Bernie Siegel did, a joke that I use his name all the time, because the foundation that he built for us, and there's a lot of very successful trial lawyers that even in our community here in the San Francisco Bay Area who went through his program, that really are different in their approach because of the simple things that Bernie taught us. And visual displays of information was one of those things. It's okay, how do you get people to see it? Right? Because at the end of the day, like I remember we were in Barcelona a few years ago. I can close my eyes and see the old town part of Barcelona and this guitar player, street musician playing this song. Why? Because I remember the words. I remember the lighting. And if I can paint that for you as a human being and how that makes you feel in terms of my genuineness as a human being and honesty, the jurors are going to want to do the right thing, not because I tell them what the right thing is, but I show them what the right thing is. And if they agree with that, I don't have anything to worry about when they go into the jury room.
Before we leave this area, you mentioned having a course on iPad use. If somebody wanted to get more information on how to use an iPad in trial, would they reach out to your firm? How would they get more information on that?
Yeah, they can reach out to me or my firm. I'm happy to, provide them some information. Or, if your local bar association is interested, I'm happy to come in and do a, short presentation so that people have a better understanding of how this stuff works and how they can utilize it. Because look, not every trial, like you said, you were the cheaper alternative in terms of a trial tech. Not every firm or every trial has the ability to have a trial consultant involved. And personally, it's very difficult for me to use a trial consultant because part of my personality is I want to control what I can control. And for me, if I'm doing my closing argument and I'm looking you in the eye and talking about something, I don't want to stop, look away and say, please, slide number 54.
Next slide, please.
Right. So that to me, when I can do it with a hand gesture, and in a lot of these programs, including Keynote and TrialPad, I can do call outs, I can highlight, I can put a laser pointer right from my iPad, and I can do it wirelessly. So I can stand anywhere in the courtroom and do it. And to me, my brain and the way I work is perfectly suited with melding with this as opposed to using this as a crutch. And if you can use the iPad to complement your natural abilities, it'll take your game from here to here. And the jurors will trust what you're doing because you're not wasting their time fumbling over the 7 exhibit binders to find an exhibit, to put it under an Elmo and then focus, right? I've been in trials where I'm the one that's putting up, they're looking for the exhibits. Your Honor, I can put that up if the court would like. Yes, Milanfar, put it up. Boom, boom, 3 clicks, and it's up on the screen. The jurors don't want their time wasted. We're asking them to give up part of their lives to be in this courtroom. And I have to do everything in my power to be as efficient as possible and as considerate as possible, because quite frankly, I want to treat the jurors the way I would want to be treated. And that sort of thing matters in the long run.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here with Cooper's Code, please help us extend our reach by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and consider sharing an episode with a friend. Additionally, we want to know who you want to hear on the show. Have an interview suggestion? Email us at podcast@coopers.law. Now I want to pivot a little bit and ask you about management of stress from your perspective, things that you've learned, ways that in which it's impacted you, and things you'd want to share as far as that's concerned, given how stressful our day-to-day practice is.
I think all of us want to go to law school because we want to make a positive impact in the world. I've never talked to anybody and said, why do you want to go to law school? And they say, well, because I'd like the stress, right? Or I'd like to bill my time every 6 minutes of my time. But these are things that the law schools don't teach you, right? They don't teach you about stress management. They don't teach you about the fact that in certain jobs, you have to bill every 6 minutes of your life. They don't teach you about business. And a lot of law schools don't teach you about trying cases. And let's be realistic. Trial work is some of the most stressful work that you can possibly do. Human beings' number one fear is public speaking. It's ahead of death, right? Yet we're expected to stand up, not miss a beat, not make a mistake. And especially on the plaintiff side, right? You've got money on the line, and all of that is pressure that's building and building and building. Yet I've yet to find a law school that has a stress management class. And if there is one out there, please let me know, because I would love to applaud them and acknowledge that approach. But law schools aren't teaching students to be complete lawyers. And in that context, we have to take charge of our own abilities and mental health and all that. And part of that is, okay, what do I do in terms of my views to help me put everything in perspective and to do things in a way that reduces the stress? Now, let's be realistic. You're never going to eliminate the stress. But at the same time, do we really want to be that, 60, 70-year-old lawyer who is just bitter and angry at the law and the clients, and every client is an idiot or whatever? Well, I certainly don't want to be that way. I don't want to have gone through all this schooling just to work for 30 some odd years and be miserable just so I can vacation for 10 years and be happy and then, end up in a retirement home, God forbid. Right. So for me, it's everyone in the profession, especially the younger people, need to make sure that they're taking an active role and doing things to address their mental health and their job satisfaction, because it matters what you think of your job. It matters what you think of your clients. Like, we have a rule in our firm. It could be a fantastic case, but it may not be for us if we don't believe in that client. Why? Because if I don't have the ability to stand up in court and genuinely feel your pain and convey it, I can't be the best trial lawyer for you. You have to go find somebody else who can feel that for you. So that's a huge issue for me in terms of any young student that I come across. Is I try to preach this to them, because the best thing you can do is to have job satisfaction and to have the tools to minimize the impact of the stress. We can't eliminate the stress, but we can minimize how it lands on us. And if we have that as a focus, you're constantly striving where today, if it's a horrible day, we know tomorrow has the chance of being a better day. And personally, sitting here and having this amazing conversation with you, right? I can fixate on, oh, poor me. I went through a revolution, lived through a war. These things happened that were bad. Grew up in Oakland, got beat up, career didn't go the way I thought it should go. And then some things good happened. Yesterday was a horrible day. Or I can say, despite all those things, the universe has conspired for us to be here, to have this amazing conversation, and being grateful for that. Now, can I tell you that every day I'm successful in that analysis? Absolutely not. But what gets me to get through the bad times so I can celebrate the good times is the persistence and the grit in constantly keeping that notion in my mind so that I can give myself a chance to be grateful and happy on most days.
Some of the things that you've just outlined are what I would put in the category of gratitude acknowledgements.
Correct.
Which are small acknowledgements. And I'm reminded of things that we take for granted. This was an example used as we discussed beforehand. Just the ability to wake up in the morning and I have running clean, fresh, running hot and cold water. And, most people would take that in American society. Many people would take that in American society as kind of a given. So the gratitudes, I think, are an amazing way for one to stay grounded and help on the stress management side. And I want to go one step further, and I want to kind of play out a scenario. You have had a day at the office where things have gone horribly wrong in a case. And it's the end of the day. What tools do you use beyond just your joyous approach? And I don't mean that in a facetious way. You have an energy that is just infectious in terms of the way in which you seem to practice and approach life. And there are days, I'm sure, where that's not there. And if you were to be advising a young lawyer, these are the concrete things that I do to kind of help myself when things go sideways. Do you have anything that you would outline for people that work for you?
Well, just to put it in perspective, my default is everybody's an idiot. The universe is unfair. This is BS. Why is this happening to me? Right?
Oh, the same tool I have.
Right. I don't understand. What have I ever done in life to deserve this? And that is not a bad thing, right? Because some people feel ashamed, like, oh my God, I don't have gratitude. No. Your feelings and your reactions to things are perfectly legitimate. And we have to acknowledge them. That there are times where it's total BS, right? I mean, the other side does something where you get a ruling like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't have the cell phone records for the driver who smashed into this other car causing the crash. You're serious? Like, this is a ruling we're going to get? But to me, it's a matter of learning to stop that snowball at the top of the hill versus the avalanche halfway down the mountain or below it. And when I get that way, and I do this in trial, right? When I feel my hands, and I have a martial arts background, so when I feel my hands kind of clenching and getting into that fight or flight mode, I know I need to take a breath and watch what's going on physiologically in my head and in my heart, really, right? So again, I can be totally negative, but there has to be, for lack of a better description, and this is the pun for the lawyers, is a statute of limitations on that bitterness. And if you don't impose a statute of limitations on that bitterness, that's when it infects days, weeks, months, years of your life. And that's what I'm afraid of is, okay, did I let it go for too long? And that's the hard part, is getting past that and letting it go. There's a saying that says, don't look so longingly at the door that closed behind you that you don't see the opportunities of the doors that are open ahead of you. And when I gave the speech in my daughter's wedding, I said to them, I always joke that Bruce Lee is my favorite philosopher. Right? And if you know anything about Bruce Lee, he really was a philosopher. And one of the things he says is, I don't wish for an easy life. I wish for the strength and courage to deal with the things that life throws at me. And that's what's important, because I don't care if you're poor. I don't care if you're a multi-billionaire. If our heads are filled with negativity and those thoughts, which it's very quick to do, that's when it makes you miserable. And guess what? I've known from being poor and, not having a lot of money that you can be just as miserable in a studio apartment than you can be in a big house. The question is, on a given day, what are we doing to minimize that so that we can give our opportunity for joy? Right. And, we had a dog that recently passed away, and I loved it. And, when he passed away, I put a post on LinkedIn with a quote from Jack Kornfield that essentially says, if you can see your neighbor get a new car or go this amazing vacation or these amazing restaurants and not have a twinge of jealousy, and you can have a horrible day and still love your life, you might be a dog. Right. So ultimately, maybe to distill this down is maybe I need to be more like my dog. because that helps me get through a lot of horrible things that ordinarily may drag me down for a long time. And we can't eliminate those things. It's just a matter of how do we strive to be better, right? I'm a better person, hopefully, and a better stress manager than I was when I was 19, right? But that doesn't mean I don't have potential to try to learn tomorrow. And it doesn't mean I don't screw it up today or yesterday.
You walk that asymptotic curve towards perfection.
Actually, I think, for me, it's perfection. It's something that I've never, it's a great goal, but I've never been someone who looks at myself as smart enough or talented enough to aspire for perfection, which makes me a doer. I remember a guy a number of years ago, he's a legal marketer who unfortunately passed away. Stephen Fairley said to me, "You have a bias toward action." And much like the Marty Hawkins moment, this was a wake-up call to me, where before I used to sit around like, oh my God, what's going to happen if I do this, if I do that? Now I joke with my wife that I go jumping into that pool, but I know there is water in there. It may be filthy water that, you may get sick from, but I know I'm not going to break my legs. And that's the difference between me today versus me 20 years ago.
As we kind of come into the final strokes here, is there anything else that you think we should touch on for have our listeners know?
The only thing I would say to other lawyers who may be listening or anybody who may be listening is I've benefited from a lot of mentors in my career and in life, really, generally. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. So don't be afraid to reach out to people and, find a mentor or even ask them what they do for a living or how they are or how do they get to places in their lives. And I think if you take that approach, you will have a lot of information. And I always say that information is not power, meaning knowledge is not power. Knowledge plus action is power. So have a bias toward action and see what happens. And 20 years from now or 10 years from now, you may be sitting in a place that you may never have expected. And you're going to look back and say, wow, this is pretty incredible. Because for me personally, just being able to hear thank yous from clients or spend time with my family on vacation and those sorts of things are things that I look at and I say, you know what, if it wasn't for these mentors that took interest in my development and well-being, I never would have been sitting here.
That's a good point. It also, and I think the corollary piece is, once one hits a certain phase in one's career, whether it's taking the time to be an instructor at NITA or take on younger lawyers, to remember the importance of having a mentor in your life so that when you're in a position to do so, you give back like you do.
Absolutely. And look, the reality is our profession needs great lawyers and we need great young lawyers. So if we value trials from both sides, on defense and the plaintiff side, we should be developing young lawyers to come up and to take our spots. And just, my wife gets mad at me when I say this about our children, is that my job is to be obsolete. She says, well, no, not obsolete. And I don't mean to be cut out of their lives, but for them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet without my assistance. And if I've done that, that's the greatest gift you can give to someone. And from our perspective, this is why I love doing it, because in a sense, when I go and judge a mock trial competition or teach at NITA, I'm getting a glimpse into the future. And like your young lawyers who came to the NITA program that I was an instructor at, these are incredible people who are going to do amazing things in their lives. And how wonderful it is for us to have the vantage point of being able to sit there and see them develop into these great attorneys and flourish in their lives and say, you know what, I remember when I met you, you didn't have kids. Now your kid is 10 years old or whatever. It's a pretty incredible privilege for us to be able to do that. And I'm happy to do it.
Kind of wrapping on the privilege theme, I feel really privileged to have had the opportunity to sit down and have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. The privilege is all mine. I mean, just being able to have this conversation with you and reconnect with you since we've known each other for a very long time, and seeing what you have done and your firm has done is just phenomenal. The quality work that you all do and the students that you are of the law and humanity is just fantastic.
Well, thank you. And right back at you. I feel like I should have had to pay for this session as far as an MSCLE is concerned. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening today. Please email us at podcast@coopers.law with questions, comments, feedback, and suggestions for who we should have on the show. Like what you heard? Share us with a colleague and leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. To all of you doing justice out there, happy hunting.